And welcome to another edition of Africa Speaks on Pan-African Television. My name is Victoria Wilson, and this week's episode takes us to South Africa, where one of the most powerful grassroots movements of our time, Abahlali Basimjondolo, the movement of shack dwellers, marks 20 years of struggle, resistance, and hope. From its birth in the informal settlement of Durban to its expansion into a national voice for the poor, Abahlali has stood firm in the fight for land, housing, and dignity, proving that people's power can grow even in the harshest conditions of injustice. And in our Spotlight segment, we take a closer look at the formation of Abahlali Basimjondolo, the context in which it emerged, and its continued relevance in a society where millions still live without secure housing or basic services. Do stay with us.
Welcome back to Africa Space. Today's Spotlight segment is on a movement that has for 2 decades refused to accept the status quo, insisting that freedom without land, dignity and equality is hollow. We are talking about Abahlali Basimjondolo, the shacks dwelling movement in South Africa that is entering its 3rd decade and is continuing to build on its vision of socialism from below. Founded in 2005, just 32 representatives from 2 informal settlements in Durban, Abahlali Basimjondolo grown into one of Africa's most potent grassroots movement. Today, it has over 180,000 members across more than 100 branches in 5 provinces. ABM's struggle is not merely for housing, it's a struggle for land, for dignity, for the power of the people to shape their lives. From the very beginning, it has mobilized the excluded and oppressed and worked with them to build housing, sanitation facilities, electricity connections, and means of livelihood. The movement has also built schools and political education centers, insisting that housing, land rights, and livelihoods are rights that the politicized citizenry must claim. Abahlali has built a politics rooted in life experience of the poor. They insist that social value of lands, the right of the people to live with dignity, to access services where they already are, must come before the commercial value that land is often assigned under capitalist logic. ABMs has waged these struggles even as post-apartheid South Africa has failed a majority of its people. Inequality has soared over the past decades and the economic basis of the apartheid has not been dismantled. This means that Abahlali's fight has inconvenienced those in power and it has paid for the price. The repression has been relentless. Leaders have been killed, settlements have been repeatedly attacked and vandalized. Activists have been arrested on fake charges, and Abahlali has faced constant harassment from police agencies and ruling party thugs. However, Abahlali has endured, not by capitulating, but by deepening its organization, by building communes, by democratic assembly of the poor, and by collective struggle. The movement has tried to leave socialism for as far as possible: communes, mutual aid, court battles, protest occupations of unused lands, organizing branches. All that has been part of their strategy. They issue demands like expropriation of large private land holdings for public housing, opposed to relocation far from work, schools, healthcare, in short, a right to the city. Framework that says people should live with dignity where they are, not pushed to the margins. All this has led to Abahlali to become one of the key poles of the left in South Africa, and the movement has also championed internationalism, linking its struggle to those against imperialism and capitalism worldwide. As a movement, Abahlali has stood with those resisting genocide in Gaza, victims of war and plunder in Congo, those fighting for land rights in Brazil, and similar struggles across the world. It has also been a major force combating xenophobia in South Africa, calling out fanatics and political opportunists who would divide the working class. 20 years on, Abahlali Basimjondolo teaches us that real freedom demands more than formal democratic rights, that socialism is not a far-off ideal, but something being built in here and now from below by ordinary people. The movement teaches us that land is not just a commodity, but a foundation for dignity, and that the poor can organize, resist, create power in the face of violence and betrayal. ABM reminds us that the struggle continues, not as nostalgia nor or ritual, but as a living, breathing, urgent force for land, dignity, and socialism. The promise is not fulfilled, but the right is very much alive. That is the Spotlight segment on Abathlali Basim Donjolo. We'll be hearing more from them and movement in solidarity with them during the course of the show. My name is Daniel Tuasante. Please stay tuned.
And now, away from that, we turn to movements and organizations who are engaged in related struggles over housing and land rights. They share insight into realities faced by informal settlement residents, the growing threats of privatization and eviction, and the importance of regional solidarity in addressing these structural issues. Their experiences show that the fight for land and housing is not isolated. It is part of a continent-wide effort to secure the basic conditions for a dignified life and to challenge systems that prioritizes profit over people. So, good evening, viewers. If you are joining us, you're still watching Africa Speaks right here on Pan African Television. So, on our Expert Speaks segment this week, over the weekend, the Abatlali Basim John Dolo, otherwise known as the Shack Dwellers Movement of South Africa, celebrated their 20 years anniversary, 20 years of struggle for housing and for land and dignity. We are privileged to be joined by the president of the movement, Comrade Sibu Sikode, on this very segment to help us explain the struggles of the shack dwellers movement. You're welcome, Comrade, to our Expert Speaks segment on Pan African Television.
A very good evening to you, Comrade Victoria, and I just want to extend my greetings to all the comrades in Africa and beyond. Thank you for having us.
Right. So, Comrade, we heard over the weekend that the Abatlali Basim John Dolo celebrated their 20 years anniversary. Could you help us a bit about telling us about the movement's journey over the past 20 years? What was the context in which the movement was founded? And what have been some of your major victories that the movement has gathered since its creation?
Thank you very much for that question. I must say that Abahlali is, of course, a shack dwellers movement that was founded in 2005 to fight for, protect, promote, and advance the interest and the dignity of the shack dwellers and the impoverished in South Africa. Our vision is really to build an equal and a just society based on respect and dignity.
Right.
We have a very clear mission of trying to improve the living conditions of the people who found themselves in the shanty towns of South Africa who have hardly access to water and sanitation, who do not have access to land in their country of birth, who do not have decent housing. So the journey has not been easy, I must say. It has been a very long journey. And of course, 20 years is quite a milestone. There have been difficult moments in which we didn't know what to do anymore. And I must start with those difficulties. When we started, obviously, the conditions in which poor Black people were subjected to and continue to be subjected to were what the United Nations suggest is life-threatening. A community that do not have access to basic services in our lifetime. People have hardly any access to water and sanitation. They have no access to refuse collection, no road access, no electricity. As a result, people would have to use paraffin as a source of energy, sometimes use candles as a source of light. And these candles and stoves sometimes explode, and these candles will fall and and cause shark fire. So if one family is devastated by a fire, suddenly the entire village is on fire. Lives were lost, and life continues to be lost in the informal settlements. And of course, people who are living in the informal settlements are facing brutal and unlawful evictions perpetrated by the state, perpetrated by your private landlords who basically would tear people's homes and left them homeless. So Abakhali came at the moment where the context did not allow um, a person who is poor and black, unfortunately, to have a place called home and having to survive under the threat of constant fires. Now we are facing climate change, floods are devastating in the informal settlements. So these are the contexts in which Abahlali was founded to make sure that one, the shared dwellers have access to land in their country of birth. They have a decent housing. They have access to basic services. All the socio-economic rights are also respected, but also to make sure that the constitution and the laws of the country are not used against the people, but they are used in favor and to advance and support the cause of the people. So we have, of course, had many of these challenges, including losing our comrades. However, you've asked me about the victories. There's a number of victories that the movement has enjoyed over the years, and some of them were that we were able to fight those arbitrary and brutal evictions that were often experienced at the gunpoint. So we have been able to stop evictions in streets through protests, but also in courts. So we have number of court interdicts which prohibits municipalities, city government, but also private landlords from tearing people's home. So many and thousands of families have what they call a home today just because of Abahlali's courage. We have also been able to develop laws of these countries, but also to fight some of the laws that have tried to criminalize poverty, such as having to go to the Constitutional Court, which is the highest court of our land, the Constitutional Court, where we have won over one of the pieces of legislation which was called the Slums Act, which was basically a piece of legislation that was trying to criminalize poverty. So, and we have built a movement which has remained a people's movement. So these are some of the victories amongst many, and maybe one of them also that is very important to us is what we called Ubuhlalism, which is really an idea that everyone matters, that every human being counts, which is why, as Abahlali, we've been able also to fight fascism, but also what we experience in South Africa, such as xenophobia, the hate over other African nations. These are some of the victories that we are proud as a movement to have achieved over the years. But I must say, it was not easy. All these achievements were paid in blood.
All right. Thank you, Comrade. So I want us to talk a bit about the principle or the conditions on which the movement was formed. So now, 20 years down the line, after 20 years, what are some of the socio-economic conditions that the Abahlali is able to analyze? And then do you think that 20 years down the line, some of these challenges are still relevant? And then around which of these issues do the movement still organize around?
Well, Abahlali focuses on the question of land, which is very key for us. It's close to our heart, and we think our blackness, our Africanism, is gone without us having access to land. You cannot be denied the right to land in your soil of birth. This is the sacrifice we had to make as a movement to make sure that Abahlali have access to land, that the land is returned to the majority of this country who were once dispossessed. Remember, we've come from the history of apartheid in this country and the history of colonialism, which dispossessed us of our land, which has brought the poverty that many of us face in this country. So we are focusing on the question of land. It's still relevant even today.
Yeah.
We are focusing on the question of decent housing. People are living in a very shameful um, uh, housing conditions. These are substandard housing conditions that are easily banned, that are easily washed away. And we are also focusing on the question of dignity. If you are poor and black in this country, and probably in this continent, your dignity counts for nothing. So we are making sure that we restore dignity of the Black African child. And in restoring the dignity of the Black, one is to first make sure that the land is restored to the rightful owners of the majority of this country, and that people have decent housing. Obviously, other rights follows. There are a number of rights, but these are key focus which really force the movement to be founded, but also remain relevant today. But I'm also happy to say that many communities have now have access to land. They are proud to have their own land, which is now secured. And some of them have the security of tenure, whether through the courts or through their length of occupation and through being recognized by our government to say, now you can no longer be evicted. You can now start building your permanent homes. But there are families who are now being developed by government who have actually put decent housing to them, which becomes your security of tenure, and provided some of the basic services which are fundamental for any human being, which were denied before. I am also happy to say some of the city government had policies not to electrify shared settlements in our communities. But today, some of those bylaws have been removed, and many shared settlements are now electrified, which then reduces the risk of shared fires and the death of people who are living in the informal settlements.
Right. And this sends me to my next question, where I would want us to talk about the political orientation of the movement. I think over the years, we've worked closely with Abahlali Basimjondolo, and we know of how its political ideologies stand tall in all its activities. So we know that from the beginning, the movement has focused on politicizing its members and linking this politicization to struggles for housing and livelihood. Why do you think that this is important, changing the political orientation of your members?
Yes, I think that is very key for Abahlali to develop its own political ideology together with its popular education methodology. It has come to our knowledge that without political consciousness, all our gains could be easily reversed, and we cannot advance the cause of the Pan-Africanism today without us engaging in the battle of ideas and political consciousness. Hence, Abahlali have been able to build schools and also taking political education seriously. So that we have seen it as a very sharp weapon for the impoverished of this country and the region to make sure that they are political aware of the forces that wants to destabilize our hand-won democracy is in Africa. We had to make sure that our members are equipped so that we can not lose what we've already in terms of ideology, but it also been very important for us to know the forces that we are up against and to analyze capitalism, to analyze imperialism that has come to destroy the values of Ubuntu, the values of humanity. Look what is happening in DRC, what is happening in Palestine, And of course, political education has been far-reaching in terms of reaching our members with this political consciousness that we are interconnected,
Hmm.
never mind the distance.
Right.
So this is why it is so important. So we continue to engage in popular education through a number of approaches. One of them is really to make sure that when leaders are elected into Abahlali, we undergo what we call civic and political education as part of our induction to say now you are now a leader leading this unique movement, which is again the mainstream politics of capitalism. And therefore, you got to have a different leadership skills. You've got to be connected with the people because we believe in a democracy from below, a democracy that values the majority voices, a democracy that values humanity, that respects women, that respects even the minority, because what matters is the human dignity of each and every person. So we pride ourselves for having advocate Ubuntu, Obuhlali, before we can actually dive into the material challenges that we continue to confront. We are human beings, we count, we think, and therefore that is what we have achieved, and that needs to be protected at all material cost.
Yeah, okay. Indeed, it is important to note the struggle that we are up against. And then it is also important to note that this struggle for land, for dignity, and for housing is not detached from the bigger picture of crushing capitalism and neocolonialism.
Absolutely.
So then, how does the ABM sees the larger struggle for land, housing, and livelihood across Africa? So bringing it to the African context. What is the nature of the struggle before us?
Yes, I think our focus on the question of land is really important and key, particularly in Africa, where challenges of African people requires African solutions.
Wow.
And our solutions is much more attached to soil, to land. Hence, it is important for us not only as a housing rights movement to only focus on building decent housing. What about food sovereignty? What about livelihood, land and livelihood, and so on? I think that's what makes African so rich is our relationship with the soil, is our relationship with land, not only in terms of constructing decent housing, but also in making sure that the African majorities are fed by their own food and minerals that comes from this ground. So what I would say is that it's important for us to work the land because the land can only produce what will keep us healthy, what will keep us and what will make us even unique from the rest of the world because we know ourselves that we are rich in minerals, we are rich um, um, in soil. Hence, it is important for us to really advance our knowledge in as far as producing foods to feed ourselves, but also there comes the opportunity to then export the abundance that we have created. Now, for me, it's only our understanding and our relationship to land that would resolve the African challenges, which is mainly poverty, inequality, unemployment, and the collapse in our economy. While we have more than enough, the problem is that the resources that we have are not shared enough amongst those who work the land.
Right, right, comrade. So can you tell us the path forward 20 years down the line? What are you recommitting to? And then since considering the fact that the geopolitics has changed, what are you recommitting yourself to in South Africa as the Shack Dwellers movement and in the broader African context?
Yes, looking forward and in starting our next 20 years from now, putting the achievement of the past into consideration, we have committed ourselves and we continue to commit ourselves, one, in building the unity of the poor and the working class in this country. together with labor, it is important that the residents of the shacks, those who live in rural villages, in our townships, in our urban centers, together with labor, the trade unions of this country and the region, it is high time that we unite these forces if we are serious about confronting the scourge of capitalism and its all social ills and its brutality. We are calling for the unity of the poor and the working class at the national level, regional, and at the global level. That is our commitment, and this is our call to our comrades in South Africa, in Africa, and beyond, that we should not bluff ourselves that we will ever be able to defeat capitalism without the unity of the poor and the working class. So we commit ourselves in contributing and taking a very proactive stance in uniting the left forces that are already fragile, because this is what we are confronted with. We are already fragile, our democracies are fragile, we are disunited, and it takes clean and clear leadership to see a need to unite the poor and the working class across Africa, across color line, because we have seen that fascism is uniting, that capitalism and imperialism is moving very fast to close the gaps which we could be utilizing in making sure that we build the power of the oppressed and the working class broadly. So we continue to subscribe and commit to internationalism. We commit to empowerment of women and young people. We commit to making sure that we weaken the capitalist class, whose interest is really to suck our blood. So there's no better time than this one to make sure that we use all the forces that we have and confront the beast of capitalism, weaken it, and making sure that it has no place in our own small confined corners in our respective countries and regions. That would be a starting point from me. But also making sure that we build a very strong foundations as different movements in South Africa, in Africa, and in the world, and making sure that that foundation becomes the stepping stone for us in building movement of movements that will actually end poverty, inequality, and human catastrophe.
Thank you so much, Comrade Sibu Sikode. Thank you for this presentation. Indeed, it is important to note that we as leftists, there's the need for us to commit to internationalism, to break the shackles of colonialism and capitalism that confront us and our continent, as our struggles are not isolated. Thank you so much, Comrade Sibu, for having you on our show.
It was such a pleasure to talk to you, Comrade Victoria. Viva Abahlali, viva, viva the spirit of Palestine, viva. I thank you.
Well, if you're still watching us, this has been the Expert Speak segment of Africa Speaks right here on Pan-African Television. The discussion has been about the 20 years anniversary of Abahlali Basim Jondolo, the Shack Dwellers movement of South Africa. 20 years on, Abahlali stands as a proof that liberation is not given. It is built through struggle, solidarity, and courage. And as we celebrate this milestone, we honor all who continue to fight for land, housing, and a life of dignity. And now, away from that, we turn to movements and organizations who are engaged in related struggles over housing and land rights. They share insight into realities faced by informal settlement residents, the growing threats of privatization and eviction, and the importance of regional solidarity in addressing these structural issues. Their experiences show that The fight for land and housing is not isolated. It is part of a continent-wide effort to secure the basic conditions for a dignified life and to challenge systems that prioritizes profit over people.
Thank you for having me on this segment of Africa Speaks. Thank you for the invitation to commemorate and celebrate recognizing Bashlali Bashi Mdondolo, the Shark Dwellers movement in South Africa, for their honorable and righteous fight for land, dignity, and rights. And it's very important because Bashlali Bashindodolo has leads the way on the question of land. And for us in Kenya, we are learning a lot from the Bashlali movement because we share a lot in terms of similarities on the question of land, Kenya and South Africa. As many will know that Kenya and South Africa were envisioned as settler colony, and that the colonizers did not envision living these two countries. And so the same problem that South Africa has had for a long time on the post-apartheid question is the question of land, which has remained unresolved, which is the main means of production, is the main means of living that human beings need. And because of that discrimination and apartheid in South Africa, many Africans were left without land. It is the same question here in post-colonial Kenya, where the question of land was never resolved, and instead the status quo in regard to the question of land remains so. The effect of this is that today in Kenya, you see a lot of squatters, you see a lot of people who do not have land, and those who have very small portion of land. And so it's our struggle also here in Kenya, where we are continuing with the struggle for land. We realize it is the main contradiction for us in terms of wanting to live a life of dignity, a life which is worth living. And so we take inspiration from ABM for what they've been doing in terms of their struggle. And 20 years, it's a lot of years. It's a lot of dedication. It's a lot of commitment. Of course, for the struggle that the ABM has had in terms of losing their comrades and leadership to assassinations. We know the harassment, we know the intimidation that the movement has faced. Nevertheless, they persevered that entire struggle to see 2 decades of waging a righteous and a great struggle of land, which mirrors the struggle of Africa. The struggle of Africa is the struggle of land. And so both Bashlali and in South Africa and our struggles in Kenya, as I've said, were born out of these same contradictions. It is the question of dispossession, unemployment, the state neglect and violence against the same informal settlements we both have in both countries. And so whether it is in Durban, whether it is in Nairobi, Kenya is also is home to 2 largest informal settlements in Africa. And probably it could be in the world. One is in Kibera and the other one is in Mathare. And in both these informal settlements, there are great struggles that people are waging in terms of wanting land. And it has taken different formations, it has taken different angles. Part of what led to the demonstrations in Kenya in last year, 2024, and this year, what preceded that, before the protest, we had one of the worst floods in Nairobi in Kenya, and killing over 250 people. One of the most affected areas was one of the slum areas in Mathare, where we also lost comrades from our own movement to the floods. Then what followed then is that the state decided to demolish houses, they decided to evict people in the name of that they were living in riparian lands. Yet these were people without land. These are people struggling to find a way to live in dignity. And so it led to a movement here to occupy available land in those areas. That Occupy narrative, that Occupy message is what inform Occupy Parliament, Occupy our buildings here in Kenya, and so it transitioned to the protest. But that is also part of what Abathlari has been doing, and so it is very inspiring.
The views and to share the perspectives on the struggles, especially on land. What is very, very clear is that the efforts of African countries to decolonize the touches on land has not been very, very successful. And here we clearly see that as Abathlari marks its 20th anniversary, it's very, very clear, as it is in South Africa, where they've not really been able to have sovereignty on land, just as in many, many, many other African countries. And the fact is that with neoliberal policies that have been so much grounded in almost all African countries, that has reversed so much the expectations, the hopes during the liberation struggles for all these African countries. And what is the result? The result is that now we clearly see initiative after initiative to take away land from the producers, and that has been a practice. So we clearly see, for example, different declarations, different initiatives, even at the global level. Very recent, of course, it's carbon trade, which implicitly it's a way to take away land from the producers. But there have been a lot of initiatives before. For example, the attempt to get alternative to fossil fuel, that is in the form of biofuel, has also been a way to take away land from the producers, but also an attempt to increase food production, but by commoditization of production and actually corporate capture of agriculture. It has also been a way to take away land from the producers. So there has been a lot of efforts. And the bottom line is that the producers all over the continent are struggling. I'll take a very specific example in Tanzania, where we had a socialist project since 1967, and in which land was nationalized and given back to the families of producers. Now, since the liberalization of the policies in mid-80s, with market economy, capitalist approaches, then increasingly, step by step, land has been taken away from the producers and actually, taken by people with financial muscles, by multinational companies in different ways. That means in the mining, that means in the wildlife sector, that means in the agricultural land. So in various ways, finally land is taken away gradually and aggressively. So this is what we clearly see. So South Africa is not alone, but it is a practice. It is a common phenomenon now across all the continent.
And now to our dispatches, where we bring you updates from across the continent and beyond. In Morocco, the Gen Z 212 uprising has continued to mobilize young people against economic hardship and political repression, signaling a generation demand for social justice and accountability.
Hello, comrade. So the situation in Morocco those days didn't change a lot than before because it's all the manifestation was like everyone knows accumulation of problem and issue that Morocco is suffering from for a long time. So there is an issue with the health sector, there is an issue with education, there is an issue with the social needs and demands that the people was always like every time that there is something happening in Morocco and the situation is so bad, people go to the streets. And we have the example of 20 February in 2011. We have the example of the uprising in Rif and also the uprising in Jrada and in Figig and other south region. So every time there is not the first time that people go to streets, and it is not the first time that we see that the system and the government don't know how to deal with it. So every time there is a kind of just trying to slow the mobilization, slow the protest, and after that they don't do anything. But this time is a little bit different because it's not is led by a big youth, a huge youth that they call themselves Gen Z 212. So the 212 is the phone number for the country. So it's the international phone number for Morocco. So that means they link themselves to the country, that they are more nationalist than anything else. Because every time that there is a protest, the Morocco is authority there. Every time they are saying that all this protest is coming and led by foreign forces or by Algeria or anything else. But this time they call themselves Gen Z 212. So the mobilization starts on Saturday, 27 September, close to the parliament in Rabat and many other places. So they was calling for a mass mobilization against the corruption, against the unjust division of wealth, against the situation of health sector and education. So the mobilization was huge, and they was trying to just appear their voice. So they want that their voice will be heard. So that is why the mobilization with the time starts to be bigger and bigger, because the system didn't make there was no speech from the government, and there was not any speech from the authority. The only way that they was reacting with those mobilization was with repression and violence. So there was a lot of arrestation. There was many people injured, and also there was last week was 3 people was dying in a Qli'a, in a village close to Ait Mellul. It's part of the south. So 3 people was died, and the authority was saying that because they was trying to broke the doors and go inside the gendarmerie office and take the gun. The problem that's one of the person who was killed is a photograph, and the people are now just suspecting the official story that the authority gave. Yeah, there was many video recorded about that kind of the try to broke the doors and get inside. But yeah, until now there is many people, because the kind of people that they was killed, they was saying they are a criminal, they are, but when we see the names is not that in the same story that the authorities say. So after those days, that was the mass mobilization. Now, this week, the way that the government is treating this kind of mobilization is a little bit different, because there is a lot of ministry that they are going to the public media. It's the first time that we see all those ministry and all those responsible that they are making speech and they are making interview with the public media, private media, podcast, because they want to use the media platform that is close to the youth. They use podcasts. They use, now they are speaking that they are part of some programs in this court. So they are trying to discuss with those youth. But the problem that's the way that they are discussing, that they are just saying, yeah, we are doing a lot, and you didn't see what we are doing, because we don't have this capability to communicate, but we are doing a lot. The health sector is improving, the education system is just getting better, but this kind of communication that they are doing now is just to say that, yeah, the situation is not that bad, it's not worse than, not bad like the people are saying, but still that the system and the government is treating those kind of mobilization like they are not organization, because they are not representing any organization, and they don't have this kind of political consciences. That is why every time that they are saying, yeah, we need 3-4 people that they can dialogue with us, so we cannot, you need to have a kind of committee for dialogue. But the youth, they are saying, just we cannot dialogue because we are just demanding our rights. So it's not something that we want a new thing. It's just the normal and the primitive demand for the people. So I think for now there is no mobilization for 2 days, but they decide that they will go outside also, mobilize into the street on the Thursday, Friday, and they will start mobilization and protest. And we know also that on Thursday is the opening session of the parliament. So the will give a speech on Thursday. So that is why a lot of people, they are saying, why did you decide to go outside on Thursday? You need to wait until the king give his speech and see how he was dealing with all those mobilization. But they already decided they will go outside again on Thursday and Friday. And there is a lot of organization, political organization and left organization, that they are having those days some kind of meeting to see how they can provide any kind of support to those mobilization, and to, if there is a possibility to have some advice for those kind of mobilization, because we know if there is a kind of movement without any political line, it's just start to dissolve by time. But I think for now they are dealing very good with those protests, and they are dealing very good with the way that they are communicating and mobilization for those protests, and we will see how will be the next weeks.
Meanwhile, in Palestine, we mark 2 years since the event of 7th October. Around the world, solidarity campaigns continue to highlight the ongoing siege of Gaza and the daily struggles faced by Palestinians living under occupation.
Ladies and gentlemen, crewmates and friends, we are commemorating the 2nd anniversary of the 7th of October resistance, of the axis of resistance for the Palestinian liberation struggle. For all of us that are in the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, 7th of October has become a very important day in terms of the struggle against the apartheid colonial occupation that has been happening for over 75 years in Gaza and in the West Bank. We know that from 7th of October, more than 70,000 Palestinians have been killed. So in many ways, it's been a moment of dire human loss. It's been a moment of downturn in terms of the number of children, women, and men that have been killed in Palestine. In many ways, all of us are shocked about the devastating levels of human loss in Palestine. And we are also rethinking about the different strategies of our solidarity campaign. But in many ways also, 7th of October has changed the Palestinian struggle. I mean, and especially for us in Africa, the dynamics have changed. The Palestinians have shown us that struggle comes at a huge cost. The Palestinians have shown us that we cannot attain true liberation without some level of sacrifice, which in this context, even losing human lives. Look, this is not the first time that the Israelis have thrown an onslaught on the Palestinians. In the 1960s, what has become known as the Six-Day War, the entire Arab region was cleared complete dominance by the Israeli forces in 6 days. It's been 2 years, and there's not been any success. All the objectives of the Israeli war regime have failed. They've not been able to occupy Palestine. They've not been able to retrieve the hostages, what have been known now as what? They have not been able to completely dominate Hamas. And in many ways, Hamas is continuously dictating the pace of the war. So 7th of October, global geopolitics, and has changed completely the direction of the Palestinian resistance. For us in the African context, more than ever, we have come to a conclusion that genocide is happening in Palestine. Most of the Western countries and their institutions have exposed the hypocrisy of these institutions. We have always known, and we've always been told by Western media, that the United Nations is an institution of what? Human rights, the liberties of people, free people. It's been an institution that advocates for the liberation of the human race. But 7th of October have exposed the United Nations. Now we know that what is happening in Palestine is genocide. And the United Nations, under the Geneva Convention, completes and is very clear what genocide stands for. The deliberate attempt to completely exterminate a group of people. And there's now a general consensus that what is happening to the Palestinian people, put on them by the Israeli Zionist regime, that is genocide. And what is the response of the United Nations? Complete silence. What's the response of these Western countries that portrays themselves as the centers of liberation, as the centers of democracy and free expression? So Palestine has changed the geopolitical architecture of the world. Palestine has shown us that these Western countries and its institutions have not historically committed themselves to what? Total liberation. And Palestine has exposed this hypocrisy. The other thing that 7th of October has done to us on the African continent, that it has shown us that we have not forgotten our roots. I mean, we were very much inspired that it was South Africa, which has a history of apartheid, that was the country that took Israel to the International Criminal Court. And the court has ruled that what is happening to Palestine is that there's a plausible genocide, which means that there are clear indications that what is happening in Palestine is genocidal. And what is the response of the West? Complete silence and so forth. So Palestine has inspired us. We will not stop waging our relentless solidarity with the Palestinian people. And the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign in Ghana have waged a lot of demonstrations in the country. We've waged close to 4 demonstrations in different parts of the country. We have recently gone to stop an Israeli-sponsored film cinema at the Silverbird Cinema, where we demonstrated to end that film festival that was an attempt to reconscientize the people of Ghana and to demonstrate Israel as a friend of our country. I mean, I think that in Ghana, the consciousness of our people have risen after 7th of October. The working people of our country are in huge solidarity with the Palestinian people. We were inspired by the Mahama regime, who sent 2 tons of chocolate as an expression of solidarity with the Palestinian people. We know that at the recent UN General Assembly, the president also of Ghana was very clear, in calling out the decision to stop the president of Palestine and the Palestinian authorities from attending the UN General Assembly. We're also inspired to see that so many countries walked out of the assembly when Benjamin Netanyahu tried to come and address the assembly. So, I mean, even though we are at a shock at the cost of human life that we have lost since 7th of October, we know that our liberation cannot be over without this level of human sacrifice. We in the African continent have gone through this, we understand this, and that is why we are in huge solidarity with the Palestinian people. We will continue to stand with the Palestinian people until victory is won. We are not oblivious about the consequences. We know that we are going to be hit hard by the Israeli occupation. We know that we are going to have different level of atrocities that are already happening, but we will not stand still. We are going to continue to fight until the total liberation of the Palestinian people. No apartheid colonial occupation has existed forever in the history of human construction. And Israel will be defeated no matter what. And we are inspired by the wave of solidarity that has swept the entire world. I mean, look at what Palestine has done to the face of the earth. Palestine has demonstrated that it is only through struggle that we can gain total liberation. And red salute to the Palestinian people. And we want them to know that we on the African continent, we are part of this historic axis of resistance that has been swept across the world in solidarity with the Palestinian people. We are going to win this fight, and nothing will stop us from winning the fight. The Israeli genocide regime might be counting the human bodies that they have killed, but we are counting the ideas of liberation. We are counting our collective history of struggle to fight and end apartheid colonial occupation in Palestine. And free Palestine, free to the solidarity movement, and freedom to the entire working class of the world.
And now it's time for our word of the day. Today's word is apartheid. Apartheid was not just a system of racial segregation. It was a blueprint for domination designed to control land, labor, and life itself. While the apartheid regime officially ended in 1994, its structures of inequality still shape South Africa today, from who owns the land to who live in the shacks and who owns the city. Across the world, forms of apartheid continue, from Palestine's military occupation to economic systems that divide humanity by class, race, and wealth. To dismantle apartheid, we must do more than remember it. Therefore, we must confront its living legacies wherever they appear. Hello and welcome to Word of the Day segment of Africa Speaks. My name is Victoria Wilson. Today's word is apartheid. For many, Apartheid brings to mind photographs of South Africa before 1994, such as that of the Hector Peterson during the 1976 Soweto uprising, armed police chasing protesters, black families bulldozed out of their homes, and children carrying signs that read, "Freedom in our lifetime." Apartheid was not just about laws. It was about a system built to convince people that inequality was natural, that some were born to rule and others to obey. It was a political project of separation, of dividing people by race, by class, by geography, and by fear. Apartheid stripped you off your land. It organized where you could live, what work you could do, what schools your children could attend, what public transport was available, and even which hospitals you could die in. It was a deliberate design of domination, of one race over another. The term apartheid is an African word meaning apartness. Under the Population Registration Act, every South African was officially classified as belonging to one racial group, which determined all aspects of their lives. The Group Area Act dictated where each racial group could live and work, leading to the forced removal of millions of black South Africans to impoverished segregated township and Bantustans, otherwise known as homelands. Black South Africans were stripped of their citizenship and voting rights. Yet, even in that brutal time, South Africans refused to be broken. They organized on the streets, in churches, trade unions, sport fields, and in exile. They built movements that challenged oppression and exclusion in every sphere of life. From the fierce spirit of Winnie Madikizela Mandela and the defiance of Steve Biko to the vision of Chris Hani, it was the people who became the architect of their own freedom. Apartheid was never confined to one country. It extended to the whole South Africa, from Namibia. It extended to the whole Southern Africa, from Namibia to Zimbabwe, Angola, and beyond. The core logic of apartheid continues to persist today. Multiple human rights organizations have concluded that the policies of the Zionist Israel regime against the Palestinian people amount to apartheid, as defined under international law. Through military orders, discriminatory planning laws, and permits, the Israeli state controls 80% of the land in the West Bank, allocating the vast majority for the use and expansion of Israeli settlements, which are illegal under the international law. Palestinian access to water, land, and resources is severely restricted. Palestinians face extreme constraints on their daily life, including checkpoints, segregated road network, and the separation wall. This is particularly relevant as we commemorate 2 years since the escalating Israeli genocide against the Palestinian people. When a state controls land, water, and movement to maintain dominance over another people, as we see in Palestine, that too is apartheid. When economic systems keep the entire population in poverty, while a few enjoy obscene wealth, that too carries the DNA of apartheid. Apartheid was defeated in South Africa because people dared to unite across race and class line. Its end was not the end of struggle. It was only a reminder that systems of domination don't vanish. They evolve. So today, when we speak the word apartheid, let it not only remind us of what was wrong in the past, but what remains unjust in our present. It's a call to vigilance, to solidarity, and to truth, because silence too can be a wall. We wrap this week's episode with our history segment honoring Assata Shakur, whose recent passing has stirred reflections across movements worldwide. a revolutionary who dedicated her life to the struggle against racial and political oppression. Assata remained steadfast in her conviction despite decades of persecution and exile. Her legacy endures as a powerful reminder of courage, sacrifice, and the unbroken legacy for freedom and justice across generations. On September 26th, revolutionaries across the world bid farewell to the legendary Assata Shakur, whose life was spent in resisting racial oppression and injustice at great personal cost. Born Joan Chersimad on July 16, 1947, in New York City, Assata was radicalized during the 1960s at the height of civil rights, anti-war, and Black Power movements, which exposed the imperialist and racist foundations of every aspect of life in the United States. Assata, who was deeply inspired by the Marxist-Leninist and Black liberation politics, soon joined the Black Panther Party and subsequently the Black Liberation Army movement, which bore the brand of the FBI and other agencies. She was personally targeted by the FBI's COINTELPRO program, which sought to wreck social and political movements that presented an alternative to the racist, capitalist, and imperialist policies of the US. In 1977, Assata was convicted of killing a state trooper in a trial widely denounced as a witch hunt. Assata was charged with murder despite being shot in the back. After 2 years in prison, she was involved in a daring escape and was granted asylum in Cuba. Assata's life in Cuba symbolizes the tenacity of revolutionary tradition that resisted U.S. imperialism from the belly of the beast and the solidarity which the Cuban Revolution was known for. From the moment she was granted asylum, the U.S. exerted immense pressure on Cuba, terming it a state sponsor of terrorism and announcing huge bounties on her head. However, neither Cuba nor Assata yielded, with Fidel Castro calling her a true political prisoner who was a victim of the fierce repression against the Black movement. Assata was not just an individual. Her struggle against capitalism, imperialism, and racism, the suffering she endured, and the solidarity and love she received from the revolutionary beacon that is Cuba is a lesson for all of us today. A lesson in the necessity of struggle, the power of solidarity, and the internal relevance of social vision. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Africa Speaks right here on Pan-African Television. My name is Victoria Wilson, and as we reflect on 20 years of Abakalali Basim Jondolo, we are reminded that the struggle for land, housing, and dignity is central to the broader African fight for social and economic transformation. So across the continent, the call for justice remains clear. People must come before profit, and liberation must mean more than political independence. It must be guaranteed equal participation and human dignity for all. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, it is a good evening from all of us.